Jokic has to put it up. Falling away, puts it up.
This in with your eyes, ladies and gentlemen.
Jokic back to Murray, another three-pointer. It's good! Jamal Murray, red hot on the drive, gets inside, stops. Stolen by
Caldwell Pope. All right, welcome back to the Sport Shorts podcast. We have a very special, awesome guest with us today, Mr. Mike Singer. If you're a Nuggets fan, you probably know who he is. He wrote for the Denver Post from 2018 to 2023. He was the Colorado Sports Writer of the Year in 2021, and he's written for USA Today, CBS, CSN. Man, that's a lot of accolades there. It's pretty cool.
It's a lot of firings, a lot of moving on.
Well, you moved on to a really cool project recently when you wrote the Nikola Jokic biography of sorts called Why So Serious, and we both recently read the book ourselves as lifelong Nuggets fans, and man, it was quite an experience for us. So welcome. We're really excited to ask you some questions, and thanks for being here.
Appreciate it. Whatever you guys want, let's get into it. I'm happy to talk process, Nuggets, my time covering the team, like whatever. I'm good.
Yeah, for sure. So we kind of wanted to just go over like our first gut reaction. Like we're gonna ask you all sorts of questions and learn all about the process. I think that's so fascinating. But for my brother and I, we started this book and we could not put it down. Like I listened to a lot of it just driving or at the gym or whatever it was, and there would be times where my wife would like try to talk to me while we were driving, and I'd be like, okay, hold on, honey, like press pause, okay, let's talk, and then fast backward 15 seconds. Okay, now I can continue. Like it was that kind of book. Like just the insights, the personability. As diehard Nuggets fans, we saw a whole new light of what is a generational player, our favorite player of all time, and I couldn't stop listening. Like every minute of that book was fascinating.
I mean, that was kind of the goal. Like, I always challenged myself with the newspaper. I was always trying to write feature stories about Joker that was new territory, that stuff people didn't know about before. And I had done that a handful of times where I felt really good about advancing it. Because as we know, Joker's not going to tell his story. You need to, drag it out of him, right? You need to pull on threads. You need to talk to people around him. That's just part of his nature, is that he's not going to sell himself. If he's the MVP, you got to decide he's the MVP. He doesn't need to convince you that he's the MVP. He's going to do no convincing. Is he ever going to ask for a book? Hell no. So, I kind of just had to take some initiative, and the way I wrote it was, I like to think of it as 95 long newspaper articles, like long feature stories where I felt like I could write it from a million different angles, because again, if he's not going to expand on a lot of stuff, then you have to tell it from the people who were around and have insight throughout the journey and the process. And so be it if it's his first coach, if it's earliest teammates, if it's, again, people who had never been quoted before, people who had never even reached an American audience before. That's why when I'm writing this, I'm sitting there like, oh my God, this is the best player in the world and nobody knows his story. So you can see, I hope, in the way that you guys are explaining it, I hope that how I wrote it conveyed the excitement that I had as I was literally I've analogized it to a treasure hunt. Like, I'm learning about this dude in real time. That's stuff that is just it's almost pinch me. The amount of moments where I was like, this is incredible, and this is completely unknown to the public.
100%. That is exactly, I think, how we felt. There was this one story that you specifically told where I was just kind of engulfed, and I felt like I was in Serbia in the practices, right? Where You tell the story of Jokic, and he's doing his one-handed water polo passes, and right after his coach is telling him, "Hey, we need to do like I think it was 10 or 15 passes in a row with two
Two-handed
hands," and
passes, right?
and
Two-handed
and
pass.
he's just like, "Nope, not today. I'm not feeling it today for some reason." And I was there. I felt like I was there watching him, have this, and it's just so Jokic, right? It's like we as fans were always wondering what in the world is going through this guy's mind tonight. Is he going to be aggressive Jokic? Is he going to be, you know, maybe just this Jokic that we don't have a good understanding of, right? And so it was
There's
really
a
interesting to see all those
There's a
anecdotes.
streak of defiance that is like the common denominator all throughout his childhood. Then when he's goes to when he goes to Belgrade, he plays at Mega. Then when he gets drafted, there's a streak of defiance that is like counterbalanced with how good he is. It was like the kind of thing where he's so good that he can be defiant, and he was like testing the boundaries. He's always testing the boundaries of what he can get away with. Like one of the most telling things to me was there's a story about there's a professional life coach that Mega implemented just to try to help these guys turn into professionals essentially. And this dude's like 18 or 19. He's playing video games all the time. Like he's eating whatever he wants. Like he's really not in a place to listen to this person who's trying to help. And for the first time, I think like that he's ever acknowledged. I said to him, I was like, "Hey man, like why everybody tells me you basically just would do the opposite of what she would say. She would ask a question, and you would answer the opposite." And he was like, and he copped to it. He was like, "Yeah, I just like to be difficult." And we had it. We finally had it, an acknowledgement that he liked to be difficult, because every other time you have to put like 15 pieces together or like watch game tape and say, this is weird. Why was he aggressive here and wasn't aggressive here? And you have to like piece together stuff. But we finally had an acknowledgement and an admission that he liked to be difficult on occasion. And that was part of his maturation process. I know that Malone dealt with that a ton. But like, what 41st pick ever expected to be the face of the franchise and to be this perennial MVP candidate? Like, there's a really interesting maturation process of emotional learning, coming to terms with who you are in the NBA, learning English well enough to where you feel like you can command a locker room. There's a lot of nuance there for somebody coming from a small city in Serbia to assume those responsibilities. And if this dude can clown on somebody along the way and can poke fun at this like meteoric rise, he is going to do so while laughing the whole way.
I think, yeah, that's incredible. I think the most profound part for me of this book, because we look at these professional athletes, especially the best in the world, arguably top player of all time, you kind of realize that they're just humans too. And understanding that he has emotions. He misses his family. He missed Natalia when he was playing, professional basketball, and she was in America playing volleyball. Those things came into play when he showed up to play. And then bringing that, and you think as soon as they become a professional, it's like, oh, they're going to be a pro. They leave out everything outside of the game. Well, finding out these stories where Coach Malone and Jokic weren't talking going into their first playoff series together, like nobody knows that. That's something as a fan we've never seen. Like finding out that he after
No
a monster
idea.
double
Yeah.
and losing to Portland in a series, in the round 2 series, I think in 21, he comes back to the locker room and cries and says it's his fault. Like, we would have never been able to hear that without this kind of writing and this kind of diligence. And it's just going back to tipping the hat, man, because it's impressive stuff that we as fans, it's just helped us integrate even more into this journey.
Again, that was my goal. If Nuggets fans could understand or relate or kind of view him from a deeper lens. Everybody sees the numbers and the awards and all that stuff, but if you know the context and you know the foundation, doesn't that make you a deeper fan of his and the Nuggets? Like, doesn't it make you watch closer? The thing that I love is that I think that this is an interesting parallel that I don't think I've ever made, but I used to think that the beat writers who covered the San Antonio Spurs with Pop, I thought that Pop made them better reporters because he forced them to ask better questions, and he forced them to think, just think differently about how they were going about their daily job. Now that I think about it, Joker 1,000% pushed me to think in different ways and to think of different questions and to think of, again, I'm like, when I was covering on a daily basis, I would always rewatch the games and I would try to find something that was new that hadn't been addressed. And so I like to think that I'll say like 90% of the questions that he fields have been regurgitated ad nauseum. And if you can ask like a 10%er, if you can ask a question that he has not answered before, then you have a chance of gleaning some insight. Then you have a chance of him being honest, because he doesn't need to go rote. He doesn't need to go robot mode and give you what he's already said before and have a stock answer for. So it challenges you to ask good questions. And I said this last night on the Altitude show, but like, you're forced to ask good questions, and you're forced to grow and work hard and figure out new angles, or he's going to tune you out. Like, it doesn't, like, I liked the challenge of trying to engage him, and the best way to engage him is to come with something new, come with something unique, a line of questioning, a new anecdote. Like, when I asked him something that, again, had never been public before in our sit down, he gave me like a hat tip. He was like, "Good job. Like, you got one." He knew he had never said that publicly before, but I had clearly done my diligence where he was like, "All right, I guess I'm going to give this clown the time of day."
What was that? Can you recall that exact instance that he said that?
Yeah, it was when I mentioned the name of the bar where his dad and horse trainer and coach were drinking late into the night, and I mentioned Cafe Hilton, and he laughed and he goes, "Good job."
I love that.
Easy.
It was.
I know. We've talked about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
At the end of the day, I think that he appreciated it. He'll never tell me he appreciated it, and I'm just gonna have. Because of what I just told you, I'm going to have to piece together 12 different accounts of people who've come to me, said, yeah, he thought it was all right. Yeah, he liked it a little bit. And it's going to he's never going to tell me. And that's fine. It's a puzzle, man. This dude is constantly playing games, and and you just have to piece it together in addition to dominating the game. Sorry. Okay, perfect. Sorry, something came on my computer. So you just have to piece him together, and that's the fun part. That's the fun part, and why I brought up the Popovich comparison, because this dude makes you, and I think he makes us smarter fans. Like. How often are we going and looking at his? How often do you go back and look at assists and be like, try to understand what he was seeing when he has his back to the corner and he throws those blind passes to like the weak side? That's, as a basketball nerd, that's fun when you're trying to be like you get in real time. We get to see what this dude is processing, and then you get to watch it on replay, and you're like, oh my god, this guy is a savant.
I think that happened in last night's game. Do you guys remember when CB was on the wing and Jokic was close to the left elbow and he passed it straight out of bounds, and CB was just too high. He was too high. He should have been left. He should have been further down on the wing, and he just looked at CB like, well, that's not my fault. It's like, where were you?
So, in this research, I got these clips. That's one of his Serbian coaches gave me, this like videos. It's like 7 full games of his when he was 17 that I don't think anybody's ever seen before.
We wanted to talk about that. We've heard about this.
We can get into it. But
Let's get into it.
One of the clips is him at the right elbow and him doing like a blind pass to the corner, and his teammates not in the corner, and Nikola gets pissed. He shrugged his shoulders and puts his hands up in the air. He's like, "Why aren't you?" Yes, just like that. He's like, "Why aren't you on the same wavelength as me? Why aren't you in the right spot?" And so when I say that there were hints, there were there's the same body language, the same reactions, the same everything. It's all there when he was 17. But again, these are 17-year-old kids in Serbia. These are not NBA players, and he's still holding them to the same standard of basketball acumen. And that goes to that quote that Malone told me, where it's the curse of being a genius. Like, this guy processes, and even Jamal talked about it last night, where the court mapping and seeing everything and all the adjustments and how to navigate double teams and whatnot. And not everybody can process the game like him, and that was like a thing that he needed to wrap his head around and be patient with, and say man, I think he's had to come to accept, I guess I'm a little bit different. I don't think he'd ever admit that, but I guess his tolerance has had to increase with because not everybody thinks the game like he does.
Yeah. There was a one thing that Jokic did that's my favorite. It's my favorite Jokic move that he's ever done, and it's just I think you talked about how he likes to find games within a game, right? Last night, for example, you go back to the first quarter, and he was up to 7 assists, I think,
You
before
wanted
he
the
even took a
assist,
shot.
yeah.
You can tell he's probably in this mindset, like, all right, I'm so done with playing basketball right now. I want to get to the All-Star break. I want to spend some time with my family. Who really actually knows? But he's trying to find a game within a game. I remember back maybe 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, there was a specific clip of Jokic where he's being guarded by Bam Adebayo in the post, and out of nowhere, Jokic just jumps up in the air while Jamal has the ball at the top of the key. He jumps up in the air like he's about to catch a pass, and Bam looks up and he's like, why is he jumping? And then Jokic kind of goes and screens at the elbow and gets the ball, and I think he ends up scoring the ball. But he's just messing with people out there. He's just completely trying to find ways to make you look silly out there, and that's why the Joker is just the funniest, most accurate nickname of any athlete we've ever seen. I think
he tried, and that's also a way to mitigate. If Bam is a better athlete than Joker, that's a way to mitigate it, is to keep him on his toes. Like, he's always, and not to not to generalize here, but he is so freaking competitive, and we know this from instances with his brothers, or instances where he's playing silly games or ping pong or whatever, and he hates to lose. And to me, that is an indication of his stubbornness and his unwillingness to lose. When you would just randomly jump, he doesn't care what he looks like. He doesn't care about his perception. He doesn't care that this is a goofy thing to do that people might judge you for, where others might be concerned about. If it results in them scoring, then he wins, and you don't get to say anything to him, regardless of how goofy he looks, or the weird ghost screens that he'll set, or he'll pretend a pass is coming and screw up the defense. All he needs is a slight moment of hesitation, and then he's too strong and he's too skilled, and you're cooked. So, you just got to watch closely, and that's what I mean when I say I think he's made us smarter basketball fans, because you pay attention to the details, and the details are the fun part.
And he does that. He does that in everything that he does. One really funny insight from the book is him playing Mario Kart with his teammates, right? And he's winning every single time, and he's lapping people, and he's like, "What?" People are like, "What's going on?" I can't remember the exact player that was like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "There's shortcuts in the game that you guys aren't taking, and I'm taking the shortcuts." It's just things like that translate to the basketball court for him, and probably everything else.
But I think that's just an example of how competitive he is. He's just like, I want to win, and I also think, again, everything is funny. Of course, it's hilarious that you take the shortcuts, and I wonder if you could peel back the curtain. If I feel like he has probably 30 to 40 running jokes with 30 to 40 different people, like in his orbit, where he's like little jokes, little like put like gum on his seat, or like just throw a piece of paper at him, like little stupid things. I bet you he has like a million of these just like little running jokes. And he was excited when I brought up the Mario Kart thing, and this was in the book, but Mason didn't have his Nintendo DS. Malik didn't have it. Why am I blanking on Tyler Lydon didn't have it either, but I think Joker still has his. And somewhere he told me, he was like, it kept the records of it, where he won like 300 races and everybody else won like 6. And he was, again, wry in his answer. He was like, I think, if I remember exactly what he said, he was like, it just shows that I'm a little bit good and they're not so good. And it's just like, you have to, like, don't take him at face value. Be like, just understand that this dude is a goon, like, in a great way. He's always trying to mess with you, and the quicker you come to accept that, the quicker you're gonna understand him. He had an answer 2 nights ago in his press conference where somebody was like, "Do you practice?" Remember that one-legged shot in the corner against Portland? Somebody said, "Do you practice those shots?" He's like, "No, I don't." He goes, "No, I don't practice." And then he kept going. And yes, you idiots, he practices. He's really good. Like, don't take him at face value. He's trying to clown on you. Like, if I was the Denver Post beat writer and I wrote, "I don't practice," and I wrote it with a straight face, and he saw me, again, if he actually read the coverage and he saw it, he would be like, "Hey, idiot, you think I don't practice?" Like, accept that this is how he gets enjoyment out of this. If all of this is rote and mundane and boring, accept that he needs to play games within the games to entertain himself, because like, it's not his end all be all. He's really good, but I think his end all be all, if he could like go away from all this and be with his family and be with his horses, that dude would be so happy. And like, to know where his priorities are and to know why, that's why he's so grounded, because all of his priorities, in my opinion, are crystallized.
Yeah. You mentioned Mason Plumlee. Me and Brendan kind of agreed that he was he had a big impact on this book for us, and his recollection of stories and how he told them, and his openness. Did you kind of get that sense too, that he was one of the better people to interview and talk to? Because it seemed like I don't know if it's his relationship with Jokic or the team, or that he just cares so much and understands that this is a big deal. Like, this guy is a big deal. What was your sense in talking to Mason? And for us, it just really felt like he really brought a lot to that book.
It was funny, like, he was not top of mind for people that I really wanted to interview. He was on the list, but he was not like, I gotta get him, I gotta get Mason. And then when I thought about it for a second, like, Mason and I had a really good relationship, and I was like, I could probably get to Mason. He would probably be honest with me. And like, now that he's moved on to different teams and he reflects back on it, he's like, this dude is so good and such a clown that, like, to Mason's credit, he was willing to share about it. He was willing to tell me stuff. You know, that one of my favorite ones is when Malone's walking around at the end of practices and they're all shooting free throws, and Mason told me the story, which I think he relayed from Will Barton, that when Malone was standing behind Joker, he would intentionally miss free throws just to irritate him. And it just and Mason is like cracking up when he's telling me this story. He's just like, he was one of the people that was really excited for this. And I can't say that all the people I interviewed were super excited, like Mason, but again, Mason and I had a really good relationship, and he was very willing and open to share some insights. There was some stuff he didn't share, but he was a part of the Mario Kart stuff. He saw those growing pains that I was alluding to. He was there for the first playoff series and those tense moments with Malone. Yeah. So to his credit, I think Mason knew. I think he's just like, all right, man, this guy's an all-timer. This guy's not only an all-time basketball player, but an all-time personality. And if he's not, to Mason's credit, if Joker's not going to share his story, then his story deserves to get told. And again, there was a healthy amount of trust there, and I gave Mason a copy of the book. He was so excited, and I was trying to figure out what to write on the cover or like on the first page to him, and I said to Mason, and like obviously the running joke is Joker has never played with an all-star, and I said to Mason, the one guy who deserved to be the first all-star Joker had ever played with, and he laughed. He was like, "This is perfect," and I knew I could mess with Mason, so.
That's cool. So it's just kind of that relationship that really you feel like brought it out.
I think so. And like one thing that was annoying was Will Barton and I were really tight. And I don't know where Will is, but I tried hard to get Will, and I thought Will was going to be really helpful. He was one of the guys I was banking on. Didn't happen. And I thought next time I see Will, I'm going to give him a hard time and be like, dude, I thought we were good. And he's going to be like, yeah, we are.
Yeah. What's funny, Will has actually told some funny stories on some podcasts he's been on in the past couple of years. He's a big Jokic guy. He's kind of always propping him up whenever he has a chance. But I want to go back a little bit to just the beginning of this book and you taking this task of telling really Jokic's hero's journey and you really being the first one to pull, to open the curtains on his story. First off, that must feel pretty cool to be the first one to get this deep. And then second, when you look at a hero's journey, right, there's always kind of that one moment where you say, man, if that didn't happen, I don't know if Jokic would have made it. I don't know if he, this crazy, story from 41st pick to 3-time MVP, which is just nuts. I don't know if this would have happened without this moment, this defining scene in his story. Do you have a moment that comes to mind in the story, in his story, that kind of is almost that climax point?
I mean, there's a lot. I think that the game where Barcelona was there and was trying to sign him, and he played very poorly, and they backed out. Like that's definitely a pivot point. Certainly, anything with Dejan Milojevic and him convincing him to stay in the gym and all this stuff. His brother, there's a million pivot points there. His godfather, like I've said this before, but Strahinja, that guy deserves a lot of credit that people don't realize. And I did my best to show that. It wasn't as deep as I wanted to go, but he's really, really integral. And then it's funny, like just zooming out and thinking about Joker and how competitive he is. I know that he says that he thinks he would have been happy to play in Europe or all this, or like if he would have topped out for a big EuroLeague team. I don't know that he's ever admitted this, but I believe internally he always thought this was possible. I want to believe it, and I think I believe it because of how good he is. I don't think you get to these heights without having a deep belief in yourself. So he's never admitted it. I don't think he ever will. But we talk about all these pivot points, and I like to believe that even if something would have gone awry, even if there would have been some other inhibitor somewhere, it irritates me to say this, but I think he still would have figured it out. I think he still would have managed. Like, he just did it on his own terms. And if there would have been one obstacle, then he would have just found another way as like a puzzle. Like, he just was always, he's so smart and he's so clever and he's always finding solutions to stuff that, like, even if he didn't go to Mega, even if he hadn't gotten discovered, like maybe he would have been dominating people in Europe and then eventually getting a lot of attention in EuroLeague and then maybe getting a Summer League invite and like somebody drafts him and stashes him, which again what the Nuggets did, but maybe they do that later. or some other team does it later. Like, I just believe he would have found a way because he's so competitive and he's so talented. But the way it works out is he gets to say dictate his story. He was like, there's all these moments where it wouldn't have happened, but in my opinion, I think it would have happened regardless. But because he was just too talented. But like, this was ultimately the path that it settled on, and
You did a good job telling that story though, to make it seem at points like it wasn't gonna happen for him. I really,
who knows? Who
yeah,
knows if it wasn't going to happen or if it ultimately would have? My personal belief that I'm not going to inject into this book is
yeah.
that he would have figured it out, but
That's a
maybe it
really
would have
good
taken
insight.
longer. Maybe
Yeah.
it would have taken longer, and maybe a lot of people made this point to me: the idea that he had he gone to Red Star or Partizan, the two other big clubs in Belgrade, maybe he doesn't play as much, or maybe he has a shorter leash, or maybe he doesn't lean into his body as much. And so the confluence of events of going to the NBA early and working on his nutrition and his physique and his diet and his strength, while still working on his skills, like all of that coalesced to where he had an opportunity. And what would have happened if Nurk would have entrenched himself? And it would have been like, he's a little bit more, like, we're just going to lean with Nurk because he's more developed. Like, the timing of everything was fortuitous, but I just kind of believe he would have figured it out, but I can never prove it. He'll never admit it. I sure as hell wasn't going to write that, but but like, who knows what would have happened if these pivotal moments, if these people hadn't steered him in a direction they thought was necessary.
Yeah, so a couple things just on writing the book and the process of doing that. If I remember hearing correctly, you had flown to Serbia without for sure knowing that the book would be published. Is that correct? Like,
No, I knew that it would be published, but I knew that I needed to go to Serbia. I knew
okay.
that it was on track, but I just didn't have a lot of context. I didn't have a lot of foundation, so I needed to go and build the foundation.
And that was the second part of my question is there was a point where you actually got to sit down with Jokic and he says you talked to the right people, which would have made you feel really good. Just walk us through that process. How did you talk to the right people? How did you find out who was the right people to go to? Was it just his local, like his friends, his coaches? That's what it seems like you tried to get to. Was it harder than people would imagine to get in front of those people? Or just explain that.
It's all, I mean, it's going to sound like corny, but it was probably like 5 or 6 years in the making. Like some of these relationships that I had a little bit over Serbia, I was able to go back to them and say, hey, I'm doing this bigger project now. Can you sit down? And also a friend of mine, his name is Marko Ljubomirovic. He's a Serbian journalist. He drove me around Serbia. He was my translator, and he was able to navigate this language barrier that I sure as hell could not have done without him. And he also had a network of people who we could lean on. So, I've said this before, but I think I even wrote it in the acknowledgments. Without Marco, like, the book is 30% worse. Like, I needed his help a ton. And I like went there and I pitched him on it, and he was like all in. He was like, whatever you need, man, let's try. Like, let's go. Let's have fun. What an adventure. To go there and not know what you're going to find and not know what you're going to get and not know who you're going to see. But I was insistent on, let's talk to anybody and everybody in this guy's orbit. And we probably had like maybe 20 people from his youth in terms of coaches, his best friend. His best friend was a little bit skeptical. Or I don't think he's ever talked before publicly, but he saw this interaction that Joker and I had in Sombor, which I write about at the beginning of the book, like 45 seconds, whatever. And I think that the best friend, Nemanja Pribic, I think that they call him, it's his best man. I think that interaction helped assuage whatever doubts he had about talking to this random dude from Denver. I think he was like, all right, I guess this guy's okay. If Nikola will give him the time of day, then I guess I can too. And after that interview with him, he was like, that was way easier than I thought it was going to be. And I I was very conscientious of the fact that like this guy is private. People close to him are probably intentionally trying to protect him. Like whatever people are comfortable sharing or think is worth sharing about him, great. I'm not gonna pry. I'm trying to be as respectful as possible in sharing his story. And ultimately, once people see that you're just trying to, with no other agenda, you're trying to portray how this happened, then people are willing to share it. And I found that people in Serbia were so open and welcoming and transparent and honest and mostly just proud of him and mostly just eager to celebrate his story on a big scale.
So again, kind of around the process of writing the book, I'm curious because you have, these 95 different chapters that are all kind of different conversations that I don't know if every single one highlights a specific individual, but I'm curious if you started with, did you do that in chronological order? Like talk to people in chronological order in terms of events that were happening in Jokic's life, or did you just talk to as many people as you could and then try to make sense of them?
That's a good question. I definitely did the youth and Serbia portion first because I was like, what do I have? Like, let me and by doing the youth portion first, and like that was the stuff that nobody knew about and I didn't know about. So I needed to see how much I had of that before I could get into his career, which I had covered him from 2018 to 2023, which, not at the very beginning of his career, but when, I moved to Denver 2018-19 season, that's the first year they made the playoffs. So I was at every single playoff game that they had. And so I just needed to know what I had and what I didn't have. And then once he agreed to sit down with me, the reason it was so advantageous that I asked him halfway through the process was that I knew where I was thin. And I knew what I needed to ask him and hone in on specifically. Like, I needed to ask him about Strahinja and his involvement. And he said he definitely sacrificed his life for me. What a statement.
Wow.
And to be able to know where you're thin and why stuff and stuff where I knew I was going to have a hard time getting to, I was like, well, I have Joker. So, I mean, I probably could have gotten 10 to 15 more questions out of it if he had been willing to sit down longer that were again, stuff that he has never been asked before. But you had to pick and choose, and I think I even told him beforehand. I was like, "Hey, dude, I'm not trying to overextend you. I know I'm already really appreciative of you sitting down with me for whatever time you're willing to grant." And it was, as insightful and illuminating an interview as I don't want to say as he's ever done because I can't speak to that, but as I've ever gotten, and
The bar's not particularly high there, right?
the bar's high for sure, but it's fun. I wish I knew. I think maybe the longest interview I'd had with him one-on-one before was maybe 5 minutes.
Right.
It's hard, and I'm respectful of his space, and I'm respectful of that. But again, you don't deserve his time unless you have reason to ask him something unique. You don't and I kind of think he's kind of subliminally conveyed that. Unless you have something that really warrants his time, he's not going to give you his time, and you better come with it. You better prove that your questions are valid, or your questions are interesting, or the something that's going to make him think. Because I very actively did not ask him about the MVP or the championship. A, I know he doesn't know what to say about it. B, he's been asked about it ad nauseum. And I just don't think it's ultimately to the public. It's what's going to define him, and to whatever. That's how people are going to assess him and look at his career. But that's not him in totality. That's not how he judges himself by. I think he judges himself by, did I maximize my opportunity with what I was given, my height, my skills? Did I get the most out of myself? And did I do right by the people around me who poured into me. That's what I think he's going to judge himself on. Because if he does that, then it's going to yield good things. But that's the thing. He never chased good things. They just came as a result of his process.
So Mike, you being one of probably the number one people out there that isn't a Jokic family member, that knows the most about his story and the most about him, would you mind sharing, if you could sit down with him for another 10, 15 minutes, whatever he'd give you, what questions would you ask him? Do you have those in your mind? Is that something you've thought about?
It's an awesome question. I think that's nobody else has asked me that question. I would have asked him about. Do you remember the section about Tom Brady?
Mm-hmm.
I would have asked him specifically about Tom Brady, and part of me is pissed at myself for not asking him about that. I would have asked him about. I'm also really curious about all this. I wrote this, the idea that like all the sports that he played compounded into into his hand-eye coordination. The volleyball. I didn't ask him about water polo, and I'm really curious about the degree that water polo influenced him. I think he played it. I don't know how much he played it, but I think he did. And I'm really curious about that. One of the reasons I'm curious about it is because there's a book called Range by David Epstein that talks a lot about, it opens with a passage about a comparison of Roger Federer and Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods played golf since he was 3 years old. Roger Federer didn't pick up a tennis racket till he was about 10. But from 0 to 10, he was playing soccer and dancing and working on his foot skills, and ultimately they both end up in the same place, right? They both end up as GOATs. So I'm very, very curious about what happened developmentally that he became so coordinated. I mean, you saw last night he's juggling a soccer ball and doing silly stuff.
Did that around the world, yeah.
I mean, like the annoying part is that I played soccer in high school and I can't do that. And
Yeah.
Did you see him recreate the step back 3-point shot in the corner last night as well?
During his warm-ups?
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
I think maybe Katie Winsey shared it or something like that, but he just looks back at someone on the bench. He goes, "Watch this," and he recreates it, and it's the same exact result.
I would really, I'm like what's really funny is that 4 or 5, maybe actually 6 or 7 years ago, we were at this like ping pong event, and I was like, "When are you gonna play?" And when are we gonna play? And he was like, "You're not on my level." And while I don't doubt that, I really, really want to play him because I love ping pong, and I like to believe I could do something against his 15-foot wingspan. But I know better, but like I really just want to see it. I think that his hand-eye coordination is off the charts. I'm sure that I couldn't score a point, but his coverage, his processing, I think that it's obviously all tied in. The footwork, the volleyball, the ping pong, the squash. I know he ended up like he played his best friend in squash one time. His best friend beat him in squash, and then. Nikola then they played one more time like 2 weeks later, and Nikola had like privately been practicing, and then he worked his friend, and his friend was pissed. I think it was the last time they ever played squash. Like, this guy is so competitive and is so he's just a super athlete. I don't know a better phrase for it, but like, to me it leans more in the Federer vein in terms of just his background and the water polo passing, the volleyball. I'll give you one thing that I noticed watch when he shoots free throws. If you can picture his free throw motion, he bounces the ball a couple times, and he bounces it with two hands in a way that looks like he's about to do a volleyball serve. Watch it next time, and you'll see that there's something there. And I've just seen it before. I've seen it when you watch volleyballs, they do two hands, they go bop bop, and it's not how normal person. It's not how I've seen most NBA players do a warm up for a free throw shot.
I like that. Yeah, I played volleyball growing up, and then my wife played in college. So I'll have to. And then that video appeared of him and AG playing volleyball in the practice facility a few weeks ago. I'm like, that guy's as smooth as butter. His hands are so soft. He can set so softly. But going back to your response, would you expound on the Tom Brady just a little bit? If people haven't read the book that are listening to this, like what about, because that was the first thing that came to your mind. Mind expanding on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, I just, Felipe told me, his strength coach, said that he loved watching Tom Brady when he was with the Patriots, which is like,
yeah,
that's a revelation. That's a revelation. And I wrote that, a second round 41st pick is roughly equivalent to Tom Brady being drafted in the 6th round. And like, just because they didn't look the part, right? Tom Brady's combine pictures are not of a chiseled prospect. And I think that, Felipe texted him that picture, and it's like, if there's one person, you asked about turning point moments or people, I don't think that, I think that Felipe was maybe more essential than anybody else. Like, probably not more than Strahinja, but once he got to the NBA, Felipe was more essential than anybody else. And just in terms of there's the physical stuff, but then there's the mental side of, dude, you can be that good. Like, you gotta believe it. And like the wavering confidence, and anytime there was any questions over, am I this good, or do I deserve these accolades or whatever, Felipe was bullish. And like that level of belief that somebody can imbue in you can have a profound impact. And I think physically and mentally, Felipe was like, Felipe told me he's reading the book slowly. He wants to enjoy it. He wants to like savor it. But he did read. But he has read his portions of it, and that was as of a couple weeks ago. So like, when I tell you that like the reaction and the responses has been like a pinch me, I'm not exaggerating. When the same excitement that I had when I was like, this is all incredible stuff about who he was when he was a kid. I have that level of like awe when people are excited to read it, when you guys are excited to read it, when people are like, this helped, like this resonated, or this, made me connect deeper with him or the Nuggets or whatever, understand him better. Like, it's so freaking humbling.
That's amazing. Good for you. That's so cool.
Like, people care.
Yeah.
But I knew that, which is part of the reason why I knew it was worth chasing. Like, I knew it was. I just knew that there was so much more. I think I've said this a little bit recently, but like, having covered him closely for 5 years, I knew a fraction of this. I knew. I hesitate to make a guess, but like maybe like 15 or 20%, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I was there on a daily basis, and I think a lot of this was assumed but never proven. This goes back to that life coach lady where he said, "I just like to be difficult." Like, I knew it, you little. I knew it. But he won't validate the joke, and he wants you to like live in this gray area where you're questioning yourself, and that he gets enjoyment out of you wondering.
I have to ask a question, Mike. I have to ask a question about this, because this is one of the funniest things that Jokic does, in my opinion. He every single time, maybe I don't know. Oftentimes at the end of a press conference, he'll slap his hands and he'll be like, "Pleasure as always." If he says that, is it like that was a bad press conference?
Well, you can't tell, and he doesn't. You can't tell because it's a stock answer, because he says it every time. There's you can't tell. It's no longer a tell. It might have been a tell earlier in his career. If it was his pleasure like always earlier in his career, he probably didn't like it. But now, because it's his catchphrase, you don't know. Now
That's
it's just
amazing.
the common denominator.
His thing now is he sits there and twiddles his fingers like this. He'll just tap the desk
Pretends
and just
he
sit there and
doesn't
go like
understand
this.
the questions. Like that, to me, that's another thing about anyone. Not that anyone questions how smart he is, but like when you're able to be sarcastic and dry in another language, like that's a special talent.
Yeah.
And with that amount of spotlight on you and cameras on you, like to be that witty. He's just like I almost feel like he's manipulating the media like he manipulates a defense. I think that's a thing. I think we've stumbled on a new puzzle for him.
Yeah, it's got to be exhausting for really any NBA players, but for some that have that kind of sense of humor, it can. Hopefully, that's what he's doing is just making it fun for him.
It is, but to be honest with you, I commiserate with him. I get why it sucks to field questions that are the same and rote, and I don't absolve him completely because he makes it difficult. And I'm like, all right, dude, you could participate in this, but I get that there's only so many times you can be asked about a triple double or surpassing this or like he used to get annoyed with when people ask about his relationship with Jamal. He's like, guys, we've talked about this, and it's like, give him something to chew on, and maybe you'll get somewhere. But if we tread old territory, you're cooked. You're like, then he's essentially going to go robot mode, which might be pleasure like always. I don't know if he.
Yeah.
I don't know if he likes it. Like, to me, I think it's just become a stock answer that it's no longer a tell. But earlier in his career, it probably was.
So you mentioned this earlier, and I think Brendan and I have dubbed it as these mysterious Jokic tapes. You've talked about them. Where are they? Are any of us ever going to see those? Are they trapped away in some closet in Serbia? Like what's going on with that? We're dying to know.
Yeah, there's these mysterious Jokic tapes, and I have them on a USB.
Where do you live, Mike?
Yeah, I don't know. I forget my zip code. I have them on a USB, and here's a good anecdote. I took a couple clips on my phone. Like I just like filmed the screen.
Yeah, the screen.
And one day I showed Joker one of these. So basically, he's in the post. They're on offense, and there's a guy on the wing, and the guy he passes it to Joker. Joker kicks it back to him. And he has positioning, but the guy doesn't kick it back to him. He shoots a three, and he airballs it. And he, like, slumps his shoulders and is just like rolls his shoulders. Like, you can see that he's annoyed that the guy didn't make the right basketball play. And I showed it to him. And, like, rather than assess the basketball play...
You showed it to Jokic?
Yeah, I showed it to Joker.
Okay.
I showed it to Joker, and he goes, rather than, like... comment on the fact that it wasn't the right shot or whatever, he was like, oh yeah, I know that guy, like that guy's a bouncer somewhere in Serbia right now, and he like starts telling me about this teammate who like shot the ball when he shouldn't have shot the ball. And it's like the things that he fixates on are hilarious, and like he's just never gonna, I don't know, he's just never gonna share them. And you know, we're just gonna get snippets. And I think he's very, very, very aware of his public persona, and I think he loves it, and I think that it's become a thing where he's just like, he's going to make people piece it together, and when you have doubts, all you have to do is look at the numbers and the accolades, and it's like, okay, I guess he was really good, and this was all intentional, because he's just not going to fill in the gaps, and like that's the beautiful part. If he leaves the general public in awe and wondering about him. And again, I don't think I have a hard time believing he's put too much thought into this, because that's just not his nature. But I think his default nature is to give a little and not to give a lot. And and the onus is on everybody else to piece it together.
Is he going to disappear when he retires, Mike?
I think he's going to be prominent on the horse racing circuit.
Okay, in Sombor, where none of us are involved in at all.
I even think he's made so many relationships around horse racing in Europe that I think he's going to be prominent in that. I don't think he goes dark.
Do we still worry that Jokic is going to just one day up and get out of here? Because there's this linear growth to Jokic, right? Going back to his rookie year, going back to his childhood, there's just this consistent linear growth that he adds something new to his game or to his mindset or to his body every single year. There's something.
Whether it's the beard or the 3-point
Right.
shot.
This year it's the beard or the 3-point shot and everything.
Isn't that an indication that he cares? And
It
that an
is.
indication
It
that
is.
he's unwilling to just? To me, it goes back to: are you getting everything you possibly can and rewarding and validating all the work that you have done for now 15 years? And to me, it's very hard to believe, because of how competitive he is and because of all that he's invested, that he wouldn't get everything he can out of himself. I loved at his MVP press conference last year, he said the moment that I think like paraphrasing, he said, the moment that I take minutes from somebody who is trying to make it, just because I'm sticking around because of my legacy, or not, he didn't say legacy, but because of my stature, is the minute I should leave. Like if he's undeserving, not that he wouldn't be deserving, but if he is inhibiting somebody else's opportunity, then I think he would call it. But I mean, obviously we're nowhere near that, and he is just a really selfless to his core. That, I mean, if somebody else can get a chance and he's blocking that path, cool, go get it, and it's your turn. That's kind of my working theory. I mean,
Cool.
It's not even a theory. He said it. So
Yeah, and until we see those mysterious Jokic films on the documentary you signed with Netflix, until then, we'll be looking forward to it. But go ahead and plug your book, Mike, and just tell everybody, if anything else, why they should go read it, and kind of the last kind of 2 cents.
I'm going to assume that I think you guys killed this, and I think it was a great interview, and I think we talked process that I hadn't really talked a ton of this type of process before. And so I think that this podcast will sell itself. That's fine.
Awesome.
The book is available Barnes & Noble, available on Amazon, available HarperCollins.com. Like it's widely available. All you got to do is search for it. But I just genuinely hope that people, once people realize that, like, you're going to get a lot out of this, meaning in terms of learning so much more than I think was ever public, I think it's going to catch fire. And I think it's been really well received, and that means the world to me. But, I almost kind of think it's going to be like a word of mouth or a snowball type thing, where it's like, or like, as his career grows in terms of accolades and whatever, like, there's this thing. Like, we got at the archives. Like, here are the archives.
Yeah.
Like, here's the early stuff. Because I don't know that it's ever going to be. His first coach Isidore told me he doesn't plan on sharing this story again. So it's almost
crazy.
source material.
That is crazy.
If you want to know. If you want to know about Joker's origin.
Well done, sir.
Yeah,
Great job, Mike.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, like we said, we enjoyed every second of it. We have our whole family reading it right now. They're not even Jokic fans.
All of our friends, they're all reading it. I'm halfway through it the second time. Like, it's really our passion. We're Nuggets, like, since day one. We grew up in Colorado Springs. Like, it's just who we are. It's what we love, and you've been able to bring a new light to it, which is so special to us. So we appreciate it, Mike.
That when I tell you I feel really lucky and fortunate, that's what I'm talking about. So I appreciate you guys having me. Like I said, we got into some interesting stuff. I liked it, man.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike.
Yep.